Hi everyone, Miles here, the golf professional at Southwark Park Golf Club. This week I just wanted to talk to you about the lob wedge. We've done lob wedge a few times, but I wanted to add in some do's and don'ts and some of the mistakes I see people use very often around their lob wedge. So just first off, and this is going to be mildly insulting to some people, you'd be very surprised. So my lob wedge is a 60-degree low bounce one. So I've chosen low bounce. I'll tell you why in a minute, but I just wanted to say that I quite often get into a golf lesson or someone will talk to me about their lob wedge and pull out a bladed wedge of any description, quite often a gap wedge, because they don't understand the loft numbers. So yeah, a lob wedge for me is going to be beyond your sand wedge. So sand wedge probably finishes at 56, so 58, 60. Some extreme lob wedges go right up to 64. Now they would take a lot of using. So where should you use a lob wedge first? Now this would probably be the ideal place to use a lob wedge. No landing area, really difficult shot, and the club will do most of the work for you. You know, if I just pass my lob wedge under this ball, I get a nice little floaty shot and it will land quite softly. First one of the day, by the way, so I'm going to have these other two. And once you've got that little feel, then your lob wedge on its own will just float up into the air and give you, where you had a really difficult shot, an opportunity to get up and down. So let me go through a few places where you definitely should not use a lob wedge. I think here's one of the main problems I see people using their lob wedge: too far out, having to use too big a swing. So I'm back here at 90 yards. My flat out lob wedge come up about 20 yards short. You should never ever hit it that yard. So I've got a ceiling on my 60, it's 60, so I'm only using this from 60 yards and in. Then I can use a much more controlled swing. So I think for a lob wedge, in a scenario of a shot into a green, never go past 10 o'clock. Don't feel like you've got yourself into any type of position around here where you've got to unload so much power into it. Because what we do know about the lob wedge is if you thin it, it goes like a bullet, and that chance of the powerful thinge through the back of the green will be from a much fuller swing. So find your ceiling. It might be 50 yards, it might be 40 yards. Don't go past that point. You've got loads more other clubs to choose from. Here is another scenario for you, hitting your lob wedge from the rough, the thicker, longer, heavier rough. So I'm just going to pan back a little bit now, and you'll see that that's, I want to just give you an idea. So this rough here, if I push my hand in, is about, I don't know, 5 inches in depth. The lob wedge, by design, has such a laid back head. Your risk from any type of short chip, long chip, any type of chip from the long rough is this. I've gone straight underneath it. You've got to be very skilled and work out how to attack the ball in a very steep downward angle with your lob wedge. So be very careful around the edges of the greens with the lob wedge. You've got to get it exactly right. So be very careful. It's one of those things you must practice a lot. Okay, so here's a scenario where sometimes lob wedge, sometimes not. Now at the beginning I did tell you my lob wedge has a low bounce, which means it sits very tight to the ground and very good from a tight ball lie. Now in a bunker you need some camber to help you splash through the sand. So if I was back here with a pretty more straightforward shot, I'd get my 55 out, which has you know, quite a high bounce, sort of medium bounce, which actually is about 12 on mine. Now this 8 degree one that I've got. Okay, so here's a scenario. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So middle of the bunker, I'm probably going to use my 55, which has 12 degrees of bounce, which is that nice cambered radius part of the sole. Up here where I'm in trouble, right against the lip, it's probably time to take a little risk with my 60, which will give me some real elevation. I've got to remember that I'm going to lay this back and make sure that I can use the bounce part that I have got. So you can play these really difficult emergency shots if you really have to. your 60 will get you out of some trouble in that scenario. Now let's go to a place where I think you should definitely not use a 60. Okay, so for me, this is the never scenario. I don't really see what any good can come from you using a 60-degree wedge or a lob wedge from the very edges of the green. I think your skill level, well, I just can't see how it would help. I mean, I could choose 8-9 pitch gap sand before I got to this shot, so you're always going to be able to put a bit more through a lob wedge, so you get that risk of thinning it and shooting it across the green. There is one scenario that I would use my 60 in, and it's here. Now, you could definitely probably be better off to putt it, but if you practice this enough, it's called bellying a wedge. You can use, because I'm right up against the fringe and it's going to be hard for me to make a good contact, I can use the leading edge with a putting style. Do that. It's one of those, yeah, that's pretty good, wasn't it? It's one of those scenarios where you could definitely do that. So no to chipping from here. I think the skill level around making a good 60 from here is, yeah, I mean, it's just not good enough. So don't do that. Right, let's move on to another one. Okay, so here is probably the ultimate high risk lob wedge shot from the very bald lie. This is where you've got to be super careful. If I get this in any way wrong, it's going to bounce into the back of the ball and just goes flying. If you find yourself on a bald line feeling like you have to use your lob wedge, try and do one thing for me. Move it back in your stance and push your hands forward. You have more chance of it coming down and nipping it nice and clean. Good shot. So be very careful on bald lies. I would suggest if you feel like you're not very highly skilled, don't risk that too much. Play something with a bit more yeah, so just something with a lot less loft, and it'll make it easier for you. Now I'm just going to finish this video with a couple of feels and ways to use your lob wedge more effectively. Now I do feel like I probably could make a very long video about this club. You will always have a love-hate relationship with it, I do. I've got two lob wedges as well, so the one comes in and one comes out sometimes. Let me give you a couple of feels first. So I would suggest every time you get this club out, feels like it's always going to be a long, soft, smooth swing with a light grip. You probably will play much better shots if you can get out as much tension as possible in this edgy little club. So when you're making a longer, softer, smoother, more relaxed swing with it, you probably find that you can control it much better. It's a very difficult club to use, except that I think the old short game wizard we're always watching from Woburn, Dan Grieve, has stamped on his emergency use only, and that's actually very good advice. Now, where I see people go wrong with this quite often is the scoop. They're trying to sort of use the loft and go underneath it. As that wrist cups, you'll probably thin it. So that's my first thing. Don't be frightened to lean that handle forward a little bit. Right, the next part about your lob wedge is you can start to make this flop shot more and more extreme. So that's always around how brave you are to lay it back a little bit, and how brave are you to come across. That's something you should really practice with. And I wouldn't get that going until you can feel like you can make your stock chip shot relentlessly with it, because you need that first. So yeah, I think it's a fun club. That's the trouble. I think, you know, every time I get a junior out, they all want to sort of, you know, sort of give it some of that and, you know, just bosh it up in the air. But actually, golf is about scoring ultimately, and this is a high-risk scoring club, but something that can really get you out of danger if you can just be at one with it a little bit. So lighter grip. Don't be frightened to lean the shaft forward. Now there's an element of angle of attack that needs to be talked about, but maybe it's for another day. But if the angle of attack is starting to creep upwards with your lob wedge too much, then that'll be another way for you to thin it. So be at home with that. Hinge, let it bounce through the ground a little bit, and everything will be all right. See you all again next week. Hope you're enjoying this amazing weather. Masters this weekend, who have you got? I've had a little each way on Marco Penge. Bit of a risk, but he hits it a mile, and if he can putt and get his grips to the undulations of the course, maybe you can do really well. See you all again next week.
So you can see it from this swing here, this position here, back in position.